Good morning, everyone. Oh, I hope we can do a little better than that. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today in person, and for those of you who, good morning. Some folks online are saying good morning. We appreciate you all being here, whether it's in person or virtually. We've got a jam-packed agenda for you today. A lot of exciting opportunities. After we go through our continuation application, we have our folks from Book Harvest who are going to be rolling out your Books on Break, which we're very excited about. It's going to be lots of fun for your students this summer. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Susan Brickman. I'm the section chief for 21st Century. And on the next slide, you'll see our entire division up here for your reference. You should know who your program administrator is and who your fiscal monitor is at this time. Alex Charles, our senior director, will be joining us a little bit later today. So for our agenda, you can see we have several things that we're going to cover today. We're going to walk you through a few of the updates to the grant guidance document, and then we're going to go through the CCIP related documents that you'll need to complete for your year 2 funding. And then we'll open it up for any questions that you may have. And then we'll take a quick break after this portion, and then we will have your onboarding for your Book Harvest Books on Break. So we're going to get started with some updates to the grant guidance as far as some fiscal management practices. And so I'm going to turn it over to Monica Pask at this time.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So as Susan said, we're going to start off with the grant guidance, and much of the material that we are going to start with is the same as your first year. So what you're just wrapping up. It's going to be in this presentation for reference, easy reference as you move into your year 2, but it's also going to highlight just a few changes. So some of the material we'll just briefly go over, and then we'll spend some time going over the changes that are starting this year. Section 2.A, budget and budget amendments. Just a reminder that the grant is a reimbursement grant. So make sure that you are submitting in Erica or drawing down in Cash App. Only for those expenditures that have cleared your bank. And if you are found to be advancing funds, that could result in question costs, which would be need to be repaid to DPI. All right, and here is a new, something new for year 2. So it's on page 14. If you're following along in the, I know Hawana sent out a PDF of the grant guidance. So page 14. This has to do with direct services versus indirect services. So direct services mean you have direct contact. The expenditure has direct contact with the students, whereas indirect student services is just more administrative in nature. So for this year, there is a cap that indirect student services can be no more than 20% of your budget. So saying it differently, that means 80% of your budget has to go to direct services. And later, when we get into the budget 208, the related documents section, I'll be going over what that looks like in your budget to make sure that you're in compliance of that 20%, 80% breakdown. And this just has some examples. Indirect student services would be travel, lease for facilities, staff development, the program director's salary and benefits, expenditures for office and finance management, evaluation services. So those are all examples of indirect services. And I do just want to make a clarification that indirect services is not the same as indirect cost. So there is an indirect cost line item on the budget. So indirect costs would be a part of indirect services, but indirect services is more above and beyond just what indirect costs covers. All right, just a summary of allowable purchases. Nothing has changed here. You know, everything, compensation, running lease space to the extent that they're reasonable. Equipment and supplies, make sure you're coding your equipment and supplies to the inventoried items, 461 and 462. Of course, staff development and training. And caveat, this is not an all-inclusive list, just some examples. And we do have the reference there of the uniform guidance to CFR 200.403, so you can always reference the uniform guidance for more specific information. There are some allowable purchases that require additional steps, and those would be field trips. That just means, okay, in order for it to be allowable, you need to make sure you follow the field trip protocol, submitting your field trip approval form to your PA and getting that approved. Once approved, that becomes an allowable expense. Same thing for contracted services and lease agreements. It becomes allowable once the contract is approved by the fiscal team. Once you see that notification in CCIP that we've approved it, okay, now it's allowable and you can submit for reimbursement for those expenditures. In addition, and this doesn't happen often, I've only seen it happen once, but if you have an expense, a per item cost of $5,000 for furniture or equipment, you need to reach out to your fiscal monitor to get approval for those items. So that, again, if it's a per unit cost of $5,000 or more, they require pre-approval. And just a reminder, student incentives are limited to school supply type items with no value greater than $25. Okay, rental costs of real property. As I mentioned just a few slides ago, that rental costs is allowable to the extent that the rate is reasonable. And factors that we consider for reasonableness is what are the rental costs of comparable property? What are the market conditions in the area that you serve? And as well as available alternatives. Rental costs under less than an arm's length lease, they are allowable up to the cost of ownership and to the extent that they are applicable to 21st CCLC program. So that means if you are basically renting from yourself, like you own the building and you want to have an arrangement between the organization and for 21st Century to pay a portion of your lease or your expenditures, in order for it to be reasonable, it's only, you have to calculate the cost of ownership. So that would incorporate, you know, depreciation, taxes, you know, if you do have a lease amount, it's just basically saying you can't profit off of the transaction. And then rental of any property owned by an individual that you use for like a home office, that would not be allowable. And this is the same as previous year. These are some examples of non-allowable purchases. trying to think if there's anything I wanted to bring to, if a cost of conducting an audit, if the total of all federal grants received is less than 750,000, then that you cannot charge a portion of your audit to the grant. Federal funds may not be used for non-educational entertainment activities. This includes spending programs on items such as amusement park, purchasing of gift cards, monetary incentive awards like for your students or for your parents and caregivers. Specific costs that might otherwise be considered entertainment but have a documented programmatic purpose may be considered allowable. And that's where we encourage you, reach out to your program administrator to determine, would this be considered allowable based on the purpose that you're using it for. And that's really specific, speaking to the field trip. Sometimes a field trip that may seem to be more entertainment in nature could have a programmatic purpose, but it's best to reach out to your PA to make sure that is covered by that. Wow, that went by fast. Katrina's going to finish us out with the grant guidance updates.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to keep going here. You know, I know you guys had to get up early to come here for those who didn't stay last night. And I was here yesterday and back here early today. So yeah, we're going to keep going. Okay. So we're going to talk about equipment and supply purchases. And again, just to reiterate, a lot of this information has not changed from the year before, but just kind of want to put this out there so you'll have it. You guys will have access to the recording as well as the presentation itself, so you can always refer back to it. But there are not many changes that took place with equipment and supply purchases, but just basically that as a rule, in general, larger equipment purchases in your last year or your final year of the grant cycle typically will not be approved, because if you're not funded going forward or if there's no competition going forward, then DPI has to take back that inventory that you purchased. So we always kind of encourage our programs. You guys are going into year 2. If there's equipment and computer equipment you guys need to buy, we want to see you purchase that now so that you will have use of it. So it'll have a useful life for you in years 2 and years 3 going forward. And again, you must maintain property records of the inventory, because if and when we have to, at the closeout of your grant, if we have to retain that equipment, we will be looking for inventory records for that. So just as a reminder that, you know, if you're going to make any equipment purchases or that's going to be significant, like computers or anything of that nature, you want to start doing that now if you haven't purchased anything in your first year. Let's talk about compensation for a moment. And we always explain that compensation is allowable to the extent that it's rendered during the period of performance of the federal award, and the activities are directly related to the 21st Century Program. Of course, we always look at it and want it to ensure that it's reasonable. Compensation is considered reasonable when it is to the extent that it's comparable to that paid for similar work in the labor market for employees with a similar background and work experience. And when personnel, qualifications to perform the duties required for the position. So basically, we're looking to see that, when we're looking at compensation, not only the hours worked, the rate of pay, the number of weeks that your program is running, so we're looking at, for example, a tutor that's on your payroll, the number of hours they work, we wouldn't want to see them doing 40 hours a week. So we are looking at all of that when we're reviewing that application, the position summary and those things of that nature. But just want to make sure that it's the compensation isn't allowable, but we want to make sure it's reasonable and for the actual period of performance of that particular grant year. And again, we do reference the uniform guidance in each of the slides that talks about each of the categories in the grant guidance document. So on the updated grant guidance document for this year. This is new and it relates to compensation. And I think, as Monica stated, Locklear did send out a PDF copy in the listserv yesterday, but there will be hard copies that we will have later at the Program Foundations Conference as well. But this is new and it's on page 21 of the grant guidance document. So an organization may charge to the 21st Century Grant no more than 40 hours per week per individual, regardless of the number of positions they hold within the organization. So if you are a program director, but you also drive the bus, it's only going to be 40 hours a week, regardless of how many positions or different types of functions you perform. Any additional wages outside of 40 hours, and it's for 21st Century, you must be using any other discretionary funds you may have. So going forward, starting with this year summer into year 2 of cohort 17, it's only 40 hours per week max. Whether you're working, if you have 2 21st Century programs, it's still 40 hours a week max. You would have to charge 20 hours to one 21st Century grant and 20 hours to the other. But that goes back into where we talk about the indirect services as well. So we want to make sure that, and what this is we want to ensure that the funds are actually going for services directly for the students in the program, okay? So the list limitation applies regardless of, like I said, whether the grant award spans different 21st Century programs. And the only caveat to this is this restriction may or may not apply to PSUs. It could be a little different for them, for our school districts, because oftentimes they do employ teachers that are full-time teaching and may have to go over and be after school part-time tutors or teachers there. So it may not apply to them, but we'll look at each one individually. Section 2F procurement, pretty much nothing has changed with that, other than they kind of condensed everything. So in the past, you had your micro purchase, and then now you have a simplified acquisition purchase. So that's just a new terminology they're using, but the goods and services and the thresholds for them have not changed. That remains the same. So if anything, it's under $10,000 or less, you just kind of want to make sure you consider the price to be reasonable and it's practical. But if it's anything at $10,001 up to or more, then you're going to want to have at least 3 reasonable quotes to document and justify that you put it out there for, not so much for a bid, but actually got 3 quotes to say that, this is what's in our area and this we selected this individual or particular vendor to provide the service. So with that, it's just basically just a new terminology that says simplified acquisition. I think before, was it small purchases? It was small purchases before, but now they changed it to call it simplified acquisition. And of course, if it's anything at $90,001 or more, that's where you start to talk about competitive bids and sealed bids. And for the most part, 21st Century Grant, we don't see that very often. Just, we haven't seen any, so let's keep it that way, but if we can, so yeah. Subcontractors, and this pretty much has not changed from the previous years, but we just like to reiterate it, make sure we, put that out there that, they may not be with any party that is debarred, suspended, excluded, or ineligible for participation in federal programs. So we want you always to go out there and check SAMS.gov on the federal level. There's a state website on the state level, and we list both of those websites in the grant guidance. You want to check to make sure that any vendors you're working with are not on any list that would keep them from participating in any federal programs. All personnel, including contracted staff who interact with children, must have a clear criminal background check prior to providing services. So that would include any of your subcontractors that may come in to provide enrichment activities. So you want to make sure that you have something documented internally that they have gone through a background check. And of course, always, all contracts must be uploaded to CCIP for review and approval by DPI prior to seeking reimbursement. That is one of the things that we have to hold our sub-grantees to. So if it's not an approved contract and you guys submit and actually get reimbursed for that, that is considered question costs, and we have to pull those monies back. Contract requirements and conflict of interest, we'll kind of go into a little bit more in the related documents section. transportation costs, which is section 2H in the grant guidance document. And it's just a few things we updated, just the mileage rates, basically. And what we're doing is that we took the highest transportation rate for, I think the county may have been either Guilford or Mecklenburg. The highest rate for yellow buses would be up to $6.18 per mile that you can charge. But that is a rate that includes the cost of the driver's salary and benefits. So if you're using like a 55 passenger bus to transport students, or if you are in a contract with the school district, it can be up to $6.18 a mile for a district yellow bus. If it's an organization-owned lease vehicle, like 16 passengers or more, it's up to $1.75 per mile, because you're going to pay a driver separately. So you're going to be able to get reimbursed for $1.75 per mile, and you will still have the opportunity to expend and pay for a driver's salary or a contracted service separately. And if it's an organization-owned or leased vehicle that's 15 passengers or less, the current IRS rate is 70 cents per mile. And that was, I think, updated as of January 2025. So, and of course, you would expend the driver's salary separate from that. Flat fee transportation contracts are reviewed individually. So sometimes there may be one that but we would have to work with the fiscal monitor to get that approved. And of course, with transportation, it's required to have detailed mileage logs. And that's just a list of the things that you have to have: the dates of transportation, the from and to destination, the rate per mile, the number of students, the vehicle license number, total number of miles for the billing period, as well as the contractor invoice for payment. And again, that'll be updated on page 26 of the forthcoming grant guidance document. And the last thing here, it talks about section 3, fund distribution and reimbursement, which is on page 33. Going forward in this year, all sub-grantees must submit at least one draw by way of Erica or in the Cash App system, no later than December 31st each year of the grant cycle. So we really need you guys to start spending down those monies when they are pushed out to you for this upcoming grant award year.
Hey, Trina, and I want to just add to that just a little bit. We're requesting that you can do it way earlier than December 31st, and we hope that you will. But this past year, we had a lot of issues with having to reschedule monitoring events for the fiscal side of the house because folks had not drawn down or requested any funds. And so we can't monitor you until you have completed a draw. So going forward, by December 31st of each year of the grant cycle, you have to submit at least one request for cash. If you're an LEA, you use the Cash App. If you're a non-LEA, you use the Erica system. So we just ask that you go ahead and make sure that you have requested cash at least once by December the 31st, so we can plan our monitoring events for the spring. Okay. Yeah,
and we do, and that actually goes, anytime anything is late, it actually goes into when we do our annual risk assessment to determine who's going to be monitored with site visits. So it contributes to that as well. So yeah, we want you guys to get everything, at least one draw in by December 31st. Okay.
And before we come
One
back,
more, I got one more slide. One more slide. Yeah, just one more before yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is, and it probably will go into more detail on the program side, but section 9D, external evaluators. It's updated on page 62. And I just want to say, it's not required, but external evaluators may be used to conduct independent assessments of your 21st century program. But if an external evaluator has agreed to serve as the evaluator for the program, the amount to be paid to the evaluator from grant funds for 21st century cannot exceed 5% of the grant award amount, and is included in the 20% cap for indirect student services. In the past, I know we were like at 12 to 15% of the grant that you could charge for external evaluators, but like we said, we're looking at more direct services to students, and this service here would not be a direct service to students, but a service to the overall organization. So we reduce the amount that you can charge for an external evaluator up to 5% of your grant award for that year. And that would be a part of the 20% cap of indirect student services. And
one of the things that is kind of triggering some of this is that we want to paint a picture to Congress that we're using funds in North Carolina that are going directly to kids. Okay. The more that we can show that we're providing direct services and that we're not top heavy and we're not paying out all this other money for different things that you may or may not need. Okay, so you really need to start thinking about the size of your program, and think about how you're paying out. You know, if you're top heavy, you're only serving 75 kids, but you're paying 3 or 4 or 5 people top heavy that aren't really directly working with kids. That's not the best use of your funds if we're really trying to meet the goals of 21st century. The money should be impacting the students. They should be getting directly impacted as much as possible. And I know she covered a list of things that can be indirect or direct, but they'll go through a budget form. They've updated the 208 to help calculate that for you so that you don't have to sit there and try to figure out, oh gosh, is this indirect, services or is this direct services? Everything is nicely coded on there and it will generate a percent for you. But we really, now more than ever, we have got to show that 21st century is making an impact on the lives of kids in North Carolina. Okay.
And that's what we spoke about compensation earlier, that we are looking at the hourly rates of pay and things of that nature to make sure it's reasonable for that area or market that your program is being served in. So we will be looking at those things closely. As Susan said, we want to paint a picture that these funds are actually going to help the students in our communities throughout the state. Also, if the amount to be paid exceeds 5% for the evaluator of the grant award, the outstanding balance must come from other resources so that they can contract with your organization for whatever you guys, work out a contract agreement with, but you can only charge 5% of that to the grant award. And you also want to ensure that all applicable federal, state, and local procurement procedures are followed, as well as conflict of interest when selecting an external contract evaluator, because often if it's anything over that 10,000, you would have to have those 3 reasonable quotes to show that you put this out there for individuals to apply for and provide those services to you. And that's when I think we'll talk about contracts later. And one thing about contracts is that we want to see that if you are soliciting or looking for a contractor, you want to put out what you want out of those services, not just reach out and say, oh, can you provide a service? We need for you as the organization to extend to these individuals or entities what you're asking for in the services you want provided for contracts. So we want to be able to see that. And additional information regarding external evaluators, we will discuss that a little bit more on the program updates as well. So I think that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Wendy.
Get started out.
Any questions? Did anyone have any questions? Did we see anything in the chat? No questions? No questions. Okay.
All right, good morning. Oh, there you go. So there's the energy. I knew it was there. It was under the surface, there. This is pretty deep topics we have to talk about today. But what I want to do is just encourage you. As we get ready to look toward the summer, as we get ready to look toward next school year, you guys are all leaders. And as leaders, you're there to truly inspire others to dream more, to think about what they can learn more, to think about what they can do more and what they can become more. So as your leaders, you're pouring into others so they can become better and they can grow. And students are going to leave your programs ready for the future, ready for the next step. And so I just want to encourage you just to keep that focus. We're having to go through a lot of ins and outs because what we're trying to do is make sure that we're keeping you in the clear, that you're doing things the way that things have to be done, that you're keeping us in the clear. As Susan says, we can paint that picture for DC that here in North Carolina, we're doing things right. And kids are our focus, and that's what we're going to focus on, and we're going to help them be the best that they can be. And so I'm going to leave you the words of Walt Disney. And he said, all of our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. And so as you begin to look at your summer programs and being intentional through your summer programs, as you begin to look at next year and the programming you're doing, let's build some courage in kids to chase their dreams and to become all that they can be. So I'll be popping in and out throughout the day, but thank you for being here, and I'm turning it back over for some more training.
Okay. Hi, I'm Wendy. We're going to start looking at the program side of things now that we've looked at some of the fiscal side. And we're kind of going through the book. Once again, I'm going to mention to you that Hawana sent out in the listserv the link to the grant guidance. You will get a copy at the foundation's program when we see y'all at the end of July. So let's get on with the program management. Some of this is new and some of this we just want to highlight for you so that you make sure that you are still remembering that these are part of the requirements for 21st century. Excuse me if I have a frog in my throat. So your sub-grantee programs must offer a minimum of 300 hours during the regular school year this year. Last year we gave y'all had the kind of the choice of 12 hours per week or the 300 hours. Everybody's switching over to this 300 hours. So each enrolled student has to be given the opportunity to attend academic and enrichment activities a minimum number of hours. That gives us a quality program and gives us maximum impact. For example, you can't have your first and third graders coming on Monday and Wednesday and your second and fourth graders coming on Tuesday and Thursday. So everybody has to be offered equal amounts of programming, okay, to meet that goal. The students, when they are coming to your program, are not counted as a regular attendee until they attend at least 45 hours of your programming. Now, it's up to you when you put them into 21 DC, if you say to them, and it's your organization's policy that is written, that they have to come for a minimum of, say, 20 hours before you put them in 21 DC, then that's your program's policy. So you have to establish when you count them as an official attendee, because sometimes people have been accepting applications and they go ahead and put them in 21 DC off the bat, but that child may never show up at the program. But once they're in 21 DC, you can't take them out. Okay, so, and by December 31st, your 21 DC needs to be up to date. It needs to reflect your current programming, okay? Because we're having people not put in their 21 DC, and we can't see what's going on unless we are in the field with you, which we try to be quite a bit. But we want to see that attendance reflected for that first half of the year, no later than December 31st. Okay. Just remember, you have to implement academic support programming activities that align with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. And there's a link for you right there with the resources. And I'm not going to read all this, but please just make sure that the things that you're offering are based on your needs assessment, that you have, they're based on your performance measures that you put in your original grant, and that it's evidence-based, research-based, if at all possible. Okay, make sure that it aligns with their regular academic program of school. I'm not saying you sit them in a seat in rows and give them a worksheet. That's not what I'm saying to you. I'm saying that the content of what you do with them should be reflective of what they are doing in school in the standard course of study. We all know they vote with their feet, so make it fun as much as possible. Get them up and moving, but make it reflective of that academic information they're receiving during the school day, and collect the data you need for your measures of student success, whether it's report cards, whether it's their progress reports, whether it's you do a pre and post test, whatever that means for you, do it. All sub-grantees have been required to design your proposed academic school year program, again, to align with the 21st century statewide performance goals. You're going to be required to collect and report outcome data that relates to those goals. And that information, if you don't remember what it is, can be found in Appendix A of your grant guidance. And then demonstrate alignment with NCDPI's statewide performance goals. Again, make it reflective of what they should be learning in school. That's what we're here for, is to support the school day learning for students who are at risk and may not be getting it in the hours that they're in school. Okay, remember you have to offer academic, core academic, you have to offer enrichment, and you have to offer family engagement. For summer, your total student enrollment and the number of weeks should match what you were approved for in your state board approved application. Don't forget, because we don't, we go back and we look, hey, what were they approved for when they were first approved? How many hours did they say they were going to run? How many weeks did they say they were going to run? How many students did they say they were going to have? So please make sure you're doing that and don't just willy-nilly, oh, instead of 6 weeks, I think I'll do 4 this time. No, okay? Please stick with what was approved because that's what you were funded for. If you have changes, if you're doing a programmatic change, you have to do a programmatic amendment that's found in your related documents under optional documents. And if those changes are requested that require a 209 or a budget change, please make sure you submit those in a timely manner, not after the fact. Okay? So make sure if you were approved to run a summer program, you are required to run that program every year, all 3 years. You can't do it the first summer and say, that didn't work out so well. I don't think I'm gonna do that anymore. No, that's not gonna work, okay? Your duration, I'm not gonna read all of it. At least 80 hours of programming, at least 4 weeks for 4 days a week. 3 hours of core academics. That can look a lot of different ways. You could do STEM stuff, and that's incorporating a lot of different academics, okay? At least 1 hour of daily enrichment. And you have to align with the core areas, okay? Again, please make sure you look at those performance goals in Appendix A. And each year, you need to serve the same group of students that summer, okay? If you're serving only 3rd graders that summer, okay. Serve all that, if that's what you said in your state board approved application, or if you did an amendment. You can't just serve 3rd graders 1 week and 2nd graders another week. Because research tells us there's a certain amount of dosage that students need to make gains. Intensive, at least 2 weeks and at least 16 hours a week. What we see are like transition programs, and you see those listed there. And you can do intensive tutoring that previews their upcoming learning standards. It doesn't always have to be remediation. Sometimes and oftentimes it's a really good thing to let them preview what they're going to be looking at during the upcoming school year. Or credit recovery programs are utilized a lot for high school. You can do comprehensive mental health supports. Remember, that's just not your cousin off the street. They have to have some kind of certification. Demonstrate how that program design is aligned to evidence. Okay, and best practices. If you need some help with that, there's some things found in Appendix C. And student participation, again, serve the same group of students the entire summer intensive program. Again, it's based on research. Okay, this is not new, just a reminder. You must be fully operational and serving students by October 15th. Since this is the 2nd year for y'all, this shouldn't be as difficult a process as the 1st year. And y'all did a great job for the most part during the 1st year. So October 15th, you're up and running. If you can do it earlier, wonderful. Because sometimes if you wait till that deadline and you have a lot of inclement weather, or the situations we face this year, especially in Western North Carolina, they had the hurricane, which we normally get on the coast where I live, and then they had snow on top of it. And then we had quite a bit of snow in the east this year. So please get your program up and running as soon as possible. If you don't meet that deadline, there could be funding reductions coming your way. Sub-grantees who serve feeder schools on the year-long school calendar you can use one or more intercession periods. That doesn't apply to everybody, but it does apply to some folks. And because typically their summer intercession may be a little bit longer than during the regular school year. Safety. You can only transport students in NCDPI approved vehicles. You cannot transport student in private vehicle. Don't ask a TA, oh, this one missed whatever. Can you take them home? They have to be on an approved vehicle, or their parents gonna have to come and get them. Or grandmama or cousin, whoever their parents sends, that you check their ID and make sure you have permission to release them to. Written procedures. Remember, first year we did a lot of TA. Second year, we're gonna be coming to follow up on that and start looking at monitoring to make sure your policies are written in your handbook. One of the policies that needs to be in place is for student safety. And they should be in your staff and your parent handbooks. Field trips. Ooh, we are getting some field trips rolling in now. That's all right, because summertime tends to be field trip season. They are allowable if it will further academic enrichment. If you send to me that you're going to Gus's Fun Park down the street to drive go-karts and jump on a trampoline, I'm gonna say, yeah, no, we're gonna have to look at that differently. Unless it's tied to a standard course of study and we're doing pre and post activities that align with the standard course of study, and you're actually learning something there, 21st century money can't pay for that. So please make sure you're putting the standard course of study in there, not just a general description of this is what we're going to do when it asks for it. You need to be putting those in 30 days in advance. Now we get been a little giving in some cases on that, but you need to get them in 30 days in advance in case they need to be revised. Please. There's a field trip request form that we are using right now. We're using the current one that's usually in most of our taglines. When we send you an email, there's a link. And there hopefully will be an updated field trip form for FY26. We're going to find just the right thing at some point, but we keep trying out some different things. So hang with us. Food on field trips, no more than $5 per lunch per student. And the rest of it has to be charged against some other source of funding. And you have to include those in your field trip approval form. The chaperone and staff food costs cannot be covered by 21st century funds. So if it's included in an entrance fee for somewhere, you're gonna have to break it out. Healthy snacks, there's a USDA reimbursement rates calendar currently. It's $1.28 in the Federal Registry. 21st Century is not designed to take care of all of the needs for a program. Please make sure you are exploring other avenues of funding to help support at least certain portions of your program. One of the easiest to support is food. So please be looking into that. Okay, you have to purchase nutritional snacks. I'm just going to leave that right there. Look at the page numbers. When submitting for reimbursement, you're going to have to send your daily attendance for that documentation. Because just because you're supposed to serve 80 kids doesn't mean there was 80 kids there that day for you to get reimbursed for. Family engagement. Again, you can purchase food for family engagement events, no more than $5 per attendee. That does include parents and siblings. Reimbursement is only for the actual number of attendees. So don't go ordering a whole lot of extra stuff. I know you don't want to run out, but you don't want to be left holding a bag for stuff you can't get reimbursed for either. So that's a fine line. Use your best judgment. And then make sure you're having your sign-in sheets and your agendas for your family engagement. That's for programmatic monitoring as well as reimbursement. So it serves dual purposes. Okay, Susan's gonna help me out here on some of this programming stuff this morning. So I'm gonna turn it over to her.
We're going to continue on with the grant guidance. So we're in section 5, which is staffing. And so we just want to make sure that you're reminded that that all of your 21st century staff roles have clearly written job descriptions, and that you have formal written hiring policies and procedures, and that all of your personnel have cleared the background checks. Most of our programs we see clear like leadership positions that are quite normal for us to see coming through, which is a program director, a fiscal agent, and we also see site coordinators a lot. And so those are what we call leadership positions. And so these types of positions are those that would be considered indirect services. Okay, so just keep those things in mind on how you want to allocate those positions. If you have larger programs, then you're probably going to see site coordinators, especially if you have multiple sites. But what I would encourage you to do, if you have one site, there is no requirement for you to have a program director and a site coordinator. Okay, that's optional. The 2 required positions in this grant in leadership are the program director and a fiscal agent. Okay. And don't forget your volunteers. Make sure that they have also passed criminal background checks and that they've been trained, just like a staff member. So that goes to all of your safety procedures, things like that. They should also receive that same type of training that you provide to your staff. We encourage you to provide professional development, but we also encourage you to come to the professional development that we sponsor for you. It's imperative that the program director and the fiscal agent are present during hours when we are providing services. We do know that some folks have part-time people that may be doing some work after hours and things of that nature, and that's okay. But we do have to have someone that represents your organization at our trainings. That's the only way that we can make sure that you're staying abreast of everything that is going on with 21st Century. Also, maintaining things as we're coming up into year 2 for you. Many of you will be monitored this upcoming year. So make sure that you are keeping track, like, of the documentation that you would need for monitoring. So you are supposed to have an annual program, professional development calendar. And for each of those events that you offer to your staff, you have to have a dated agenda, sign-in sheets, the presentation materials, and you should be getting an evaluation completed on the PD that you offered. Those are the things that we'll request during monitoring to make sure that you have all of these ahead of time. I would encourage you to go ahead and make sure that you're keeping records of when you provide these types of opportunities for your staff. We're going to look at 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're talking about collaborations, the safety policies and procedures, reporting requirements, and program evaluation. Make sure that you are reaching out and collaborating with your feeder schools. If you ever encounter any issues with schools being able to provide signatures for your collaboration forms, I ask that you reach out to your program administrator first. Lots of times we can run interference for you and provide that support that you might need in order to make connections in a district or in a school where you're trying to provide services. So just make sure that you reach out if you're having trouble getting those documents signed, because you have to have that in order, for you to upload all of your documents for us for the continuation. We have to still see that ongoing communication is part of what you're doing on a regular basis. And to show how you're being actively collaborative, you should be keeping things like your schedules of communication with the feeder schools, like who do you meet with, what do you talk about, when are you meeting, any dated meeting notes and agendas, any where they may provide you some data if they do. If you have a data sharing agreement that you were able to get signed, then that can be evidence for showing collaboration if you're monitored. And any other types of communications like memos, letters, emails back and forth between you and the feeder schools, all of those types of documents would count for you meeting compliance for a monitoring. Private schools, make sure that you are doing this, that you're reaching out annually. You should have done this past year, but going into this upcoming school year, you are still required to consult with private schools. And so make sure that you are reaching out to them and that you're keeping the documentation for that. And one type of reach out that is mandatory is that you need to provide them with a certified mail so that you can get the receipt back. And that gives us proof that you have reached out to them and either they have declined services or they have just not responded to you. And so you have to have 3 attempts. And so that's what we would look for when we come to monitor. So make sure you're keeping that documentation on file. You don't have to submit it to us any other time, but we want to be able to see it when we monitor. So make sure you're just keeping a record. This is not new. All of you should be aware that you should have offered at least 3 educational workshops for parents and family or caregivers this past year. And those are the different topics. I'm not going to read these to you, but making sure that you have provided each one of these throughout the course of the year. What is new is that for summer programs, we are not really seeing a whole lot of parent and family engagement in many areas. And so starting this year, we would like for you to at least offer 1 workshop in the summer for parents. Whatever type of family engagement event, workshop that you can provide, we ask that you do that. And it should be on one of those 3 topics. Doesn't have to be the same training, but it still should touch on one of those 3 workshops, because over the course of 3 years, we're hoping to start seeing our programs do at least one of those each year, and you would cover all 3 by the end of the grant cycle. Okay, you're in year 2, so you may not get to all 3 of them, but we do ask that you provide at least 1 this summer, one of those 3 topics that were on the previous slide. And then going into the next summer, your final year, you would provide at least 1 other opportunity for parent engagement. Any questions about that? Uh-huh.
But you're saying this summer, right now, we need to offer a parent engagement.
At least 1.
But we've already offered 3 that for this year.
Right, that's okay, but you would still need to do something this summer for your families, at least 1 thing. And it can be part of your orientation, as long as you're including a topic on attendance and how that is directly impacting student success in the upcoming school year. It doesn't have to be extra, but when you do an orientation, we want you to at least provide some type of workshop for the parents while you have them there.
I've already done that for the summer.
Okay. Yeah, you're okay. It's not meant to be burdensome. You can simply do this by adding it into a piece of your orientation, okay? But it should be more than just having them come in and sign a paper and walking out your door. We want you to be able to provide some type of quality engagement activity with them, at least once. Okay. And so, yes, did you have a question? Okay, so when we monitor, one of the things that we will ask you for as far as documentation for parent and family engagement is for us to see that you did provide a handbook to your parents and that you have a signed attestation that says, yes, I received my handbook. So we'll ask maybe for 3 samples of that just to show us some of the signature pages. You should be collecting interest surveys from your parents from time to time throughout the year. And so we would need to see evidence of at least one of those interest surveys. Evidence that the family engagement workshops have happened. So you would, again, it's like dated agendas, sign-in sheets, things of that nature, and that you have a written family engagement plan. That should be part of your handbook, and we can, most of the time we see that embedded into the handbooks, okay? Emergency drills. I do want to stress this one a little bit because what we have encountered going out and about throughout the year is that some drills are not taking place until really late in the year, okay? And one of the things that you're required to do within the first 30 days is you should have each of these 3 drills that are listed up here. You should have a fire drill, you should have a tornado drill, and you should have an active shooter lockdown drill, okay? Within the first 30 days. That shouldn't be the only time you do it, but your initial one should definitely happen within that first 30 days to make sure if there ever is an incident, Your staff know what to do and your students know what to do. So during summer, because many of you will only have kids 3, 4, some have 5 or 6 weeks, you need to conduct those drills within the first week. Okay? That's a good practice to have, making sure that everybody is safe, everybody knows where to go. And another thing, on some visits that I went on this past year, volunteers had not been trained in these practices. And so when we interviewed folks, some shared with us that I've never participated in a drill. They don't know what to do during that time. That's not good. Everybody that is serving and working with your kids should know what to do in the case of an emergency. Okay, so just make sure that you're keeping track of those trainings. When you provide the trainings, you should keep documentation that all of your staff has been trained. Okay, and then when we come, we will look for emergency drill proof. Okay, you see how this one is dated, time-stamped. It tells us exactly how many minutes it lasted, and it's signed. So those are the things that we're going to look for, is that you have the date, the time, the type of drill, number of participants. Some of this is optional, but this is just a good checklist for you to have. This is a sample, so you don't have to use this one, but I highly encourage you to have something like this so that you can keep evidence and that you sign off on it once it's been conducted. So somebody is initialing it. It should be the program director, site coordinator, someone in leadership should be signing off on this, that this drill has happened. And for those of you that are LEAs and you have a program, the regular school day emergency policies and procedures are not sufficient in demonstrating compliance. We have to make sure, even though you can say, well, they were trained during the school day, that doesn't matter. They need to know where to go during after school, because many times your students, even in a school, are not going to be served in after school in the same area of the building that they went to class. And so we just still have to make sure that we practice those drills. The ones during the school day cannot count for 21st century. Okay. Program attendance. I will say this year, we had some really good attendance rates, which we were very happy about, because the more that we can show that kids are coming to your program on a regular basis, the better it is for us. And that's the picture we want to keep painting, that yes, kids are coming to this program. They're attending regularly. It's not a drop-in program. Our ADAs were higher this year than they have been. And so we're very thankful for that and the hard work that you guys have put into making sure kids are coming on a regular basis. We want to make sure that you continue that. Monitoring 21 DC is so important for you. I mean, you can go in and track students and say, oh, I see I've got 10 kids that are right there that are almost at my 45 hours. You might want to have conversations with those kids and those parents and say, look, you know, you're almost at that metric. You're almost at 45 hours. I really need to make sure that your kid is coming every day. You need to be here. Encourage that attendance. Look through 21 DC. If you've got students that came and they've only logged 10 hours and you haven't seen them in 2 weeks, somebody should be reaching out. Okay. If you monitor it closely, I'm telling you, programs that look at it consistently, like every week, and they kind of look and see where they are with their numbers, they have no trouble meeting those metrics every year. Yes. Right. Who's your program administrator? Okay. If you want to, what we can do is we can work to set up an appointment, like to kind of meet and discuss it offline. There are some strategies that we could probably help you put in place to help you with that, depending on like what kind of collaboration we could get with the schools. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Remember, your second and third installments are based on those 45 hours and the 90 hours in order for you to apply for those funds. And then your summer installment comes in one full installment. Many of you have already received your summer installment because you have spent down most of your academic year funds. And so we appreciate you paying close attention to that. For those of you that have not received your summer installment, we are going to push the rest of those out pretty shortly. We do ask that you continue to spend down the funds that are in FY24, and that there may be some of you that will have to see funds showing up in FY23, but we will communicate that out to you. We have been working closely with our allotment section, trying to figure out what funds are going to expire, because we don't want to leave anything sitting on the table. Some of this is out of your control. It's things that have had to transition here at DPI. They've gone through a completely new financial system. And so really trying to track down what funds are in what grant year has been very tiring this year, just to put it mildly, but we are working very closely with them and trying to figure out the best way to ensure that the oldest money is spent first. Okay, so we do appreciate you being patient with us and working with us and getting those funds spent down like you should. Talked a little bit already about program evaluations. One of the main things that we do require is that you complete the one that is provided to you by the Service Center. And that is due annually by September 30th. And that template is now available in CCIP. So if you are trying to push anything else through before you're ready for your evaluation, you have to upload a blank document. We've communicated that out on the listserv, but I think a lot of people have missed that because we're getting lots of calls about, I can't get my application to move forward because it's throwing an error about the evaluation. All you have to do is upload a blank piece of paper in there. It's just a placeholder. And so when you get ready to submit your evaluation, you can go back in. And the only reason it's doing that is because it's a required document. And so anytime a required document is dropped into the system, you can't move it up the chain unless there's something in that spot. Okay, so you can just put a blank placeholder in there and that will help you move it up. Okay, just don't forget to go back in and put your evaluation in. And just as a reminder, I know Katrina and Monica touched on this when they were talking about the fiscal aspects of things, but we don't require you to have an external evaluator because we already provide a service to you to make sure that you complete an evaluation every year. And we pay for that. That doesn't cost you anything. If you want to do that, that is perfectly fine. But just remember, it can't exceed 5% of your total grant award, okay? And it is included in your 20%. So if you want to spend funds on an evaluator and you want to spend more funds, then that is okay. You just need to have other resources. And some of you do that. Some of you don't charge your evaluation to 21st Century because you already have someone that is conducting that for you already. And you're paying for that out of a different pot, and that's okay. And the last thing is just making sure that you have a sustainability plan. That's something that we do monitor for, and we do see a lot of organizations that don't have that. And so just as a reminder, that's one thing that during monitoring we do look for. So make sure that you do have some sort of sustainability plan, like in the event that 21st Century funds are reduced or they go away, are you going to be able to sustain your program? What other funds do you have? And just remember, we're not meant to be the sole source of funding for after school and summer program. We know it costs a lot to run a good quality program throughout the academic year and the summer. So it is to your benefit to have other funding sources coming in. And we're hoping that, you know, right now we're seeing where 21st Century is possibly they want to zero it out. That's why we want to make sure that we're always advocating for 21st Century, and we're showing that, you know, we are able to blend other funds and that we're not just relying on that as our single source. It's a huge piece of it, which is why we don't want it to go away. Okay, so more than ever, we need you advocating for the program, sharing your story. Many of you should have seen in our in our listserv that we sent out where NCCAP is asking for you to provide testimonials on how 21st Century has impacted your community. And so we encourage you to take part in that. The more good we can show that 21st Century is doing in the communities in North Carolina, the better off we're going to be. I've spoken with some legislators myself. I actually have another person from the Senate that wants to talk to me about 21st Century specifically. And so I'm going to be sharing, you know, data that our new evaluation has just been released from the Surf Center, and you all will be receiving your individual reports within the next 2 weeks from your program administrator. And our evaluation looks pretty good. We're showing gains across the state, which is great. And so any chance that I have to get that information out there, I'm doing that. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Just real quickly on monitoring, I know we've talked about it throughout this presentation about things that you should be keeping track of. We are going to provide you with a monitoring training. We are going to be using Title I Crate this upcoming year to streamline our monitoring process, and it's very simple to use, and it's just an area where you're going to go in and upload your documents for monitoring. And we're going to provide training for you September the 10th, and it's not at the Surf Center. Got to update that. Can someone go in there live and update it? It's actually going to be here where you are right now. And it's going to be September the 10th. And that is going to be for monitoring. So we will provide you with fiscal monitoring training as well as the program side. So we ask that you have someone here for program and someone here for the fiscal side. So that's your fiscal agent, or if you have a chief financial officer that would be the better fit to come to that. We have to have representation for both. So we need to have someone here that, like the program director or a site coordinator, someone who is in a leadership position should attend that meeting. And so more information will be coming out to you about that, but I wanted to go ahead and give you that date so that you could get it on your calendars. So please go ahead and make sure that you're holding September the 10th for that training. And in the fall, we will send out a risk assessment email that tells you what your score was, what type of monitoring, if any, that you will receive this upcoming year. Just know if you do not receive monitoring this year, you will receive it in the 3rd year. Everybody that gets the 21st Century Grant is monitored at least once during the 3-year grant cycle, okay? And we'll go through more of this during the training, but there are 2 types of program monitoring. Those are the comprehensive monitorings, and then we have a modified. So we have 4 strands that you could be monitored on. If you're rated at moderate risk, we may not look but at 2 of the 4 strands when we monitor, but you would know that going in once we oh no. Oh. Are our folks online still with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But you would receive one or the other this upcoming year. And then the same is for our fiscal. We have a fiscal monitoring review or a desk review. And so if you get it's a full monitoring review for fiscal, then that means they would come on site, just like what we do for a program. If you get a desk review, it's exactly what it sounds like. They look at it at their desk. They would pull down a drawdown or 2, review your expenses, make sure that everything is reasonable and allowable, and then you would receive communication from your fiscal monitor on what your next steps would be. The other thing that we will do as part of, it's not really monitoring, but we have technical assistance visits, and many of you should know what that is because you received them this year. We had 2 fiscal TA sessions across the state, one in the fall, one in the spring, and then those of you for program, your program administrator scheduled 2 visits with you at least once in the fall and once in the spring. We will be conducting summer site visits. This is not a monitoring. This is actually just a site visit. We're coming out just to check to see how summer program is going. We'll look at a few things. We probably will ask you, how's your enrollment and recruitment going? How many students do you have? Are they coming regularly? Do you feel like, you're meeting your enrollment goals? Things of that nature. It is not a monitoring where you're going to receive a report or anything like that or issue any findings unless there's something crazy going on and we come in and, kids are jumping off roofs and, we've got some major safety concerns. That's not what this is about. It's really just to come in and check and make sure everything's going smoothly for you for summer. Okay. And so you will receive one of those this summer and your PA will reach out to you about the date and time. No, No, no. There will not be any materials that you will have to submit ahead of time. They will email you, let you know what day they're coming. We're only going to be there for, I think y'all booked them for like 90 minutes. Well, we stepped out. No more than 90 minutes, because what they're going to try to do is hit several summer programs in one day. So they'll give you a time and say, I'm going to come from, 9 to 10, 9 to 10:30. They'll want to, mostly it's to walk around with you and see what's going on. We want to see what the kids are doing during the summer. And it's almost like a walk and talk. They'll ask you some questions, see how things are going. They will have an agenda that they'll go by, just so that for consistency, I want all of them to kind of ask the same questions, but it's not anything that you're going to have to send in ahead of time. Just as a reminder, make sure that you're always adhering, to guidelines. We don't ever want to get to the point where we have to terminate a grant. I've had to terminate grants in my tenure here at DPI. It's not fun. We always hate to have to do that, and it's the last resort. But we do ask that you please make sure that you are following the rules and the guidelines. And that if you're not sure about something, what should you do? Ask. Okay, you've got plenty of folks here that will be willing to help you. So if you don't know, just ask us, and we will be glad to get on a call with you if we need to stop by. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need. So again, this is not something that we like to do, but we have to always inform our subgrantees each year, make sure that you're following what you're supposed to be doing so that this never becomes an issue. If it does, there's always an appeals process, and we have to make sure that you're aware of what that is as well. And again, this is in your grant guidance documents. The full process is on page 75 through 77 if you want to read that. Okay, and we're going to take about a 5-minute break at this time, so you can get up and stretch if you want to get some more coffee, fruit. There's still some bagels and muffins over here, and for those of you online, it'll give you a chance to take a bathroom break as well. So we'll come back together in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
we're gonna go ahead and come together in just a moment to resume and start looking at related documents. This bronchitis does not want to go away. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and hop back in. We're gonna be talking about some programmatic related documents. Just as a reminder, how to upload documents in CCIP. Hopefully, you've been through the grant 1 year, so I hope that this is nothing new to you. But sometimes looking at a new fiscal year can be a little tricky. So when you're going in to do your continuation application, make sure you flip it to fiscal year 26. Okay, instead of 2025, you're going to look at 2026. Okay, search your funding applications. And you're gonna select, I know the screenshots aren't exactly this year, but we don't have, actually the CCIP document will be live on Monday, so we couldn't get updated screenshots just yet. So FPMS 21st CCLC cohort 17 year 2. Okay, so that's what you're gonna be looking for. And typically, we are way different in North Carolina. If you didn't know, most other states are exactly the opposite as far as who receives the money. Most states, 75% of the money goes to school systems. Okay. Here in North Carolina, we are the anomaly among the 50 states. 75% of our money goes to non-school systems. Okay. So that's another reason we're pushing really hard. We need to show that we are a support to those school districts and those families and students to achieve the things they need to achieve. So anyway, I'm going to step off that soapbox for a moment. Okay, you're also going to select draft started because we're doing a brand new application. And then you're going to navigate to related documents. This year, actually, instead of grant details, there's actually going to be an application. Long story on the why, just suffice it to say they couldn't do things under our timeline. So you'll have actually a document that you'll upload that takes the place of grant details. You'll see it. It'll be right at the top, right above the basic program information. So once all your documents have been uploaded, you're going to change that status to Chief Administrator Approved. Remember, it goes through several iterations. It goes like draft started, draft completed, then it goes to Fiscal Agent Approved. So it goes through several iterations before we can even do anything with it. It has to be at Chief Administrator Approved for us to be able to touch the document to do things with it. Now we can see what you're doing. We just can't approve anything. I did a quick screenshot here. This should be pretty much the documents, the basic stuff that you're used to seeing. Please pay attention, and I'm gonna go through some of the changes to some of these documents. But we wanted to have just a kind of a list. As I said, it'll be operational on Monday. So I had to get a screenshot from another application. Okay, program updates and changes. This is going to look way different to you. The basic program information sheet is different this year. Okay. Make sure that you've got your organization code, your hired staff, your program site locations. If we need to add lines, we can do that. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this is going to look a little different this year. Just read the directions. It should be self-explanatory, but if it's not, talk to your program administrator. We were just looking for a little more information. If we can go to that basic information sheet and pull it, it's just helpful. Because instead of digging back through old applications and different things. If you have a programmatic change from your original approved SBE application, please make sure and do a programmatic amendment before you implement the changes, not after. Okay. Also, I'm just putting this out here on this slide and you'll see it again in the next. Make sure you read the assurances. Please, especially at the bottom. If you think I've read it before, look at the bottom. That's usually where the new stuff is, okay? And you know, if it's added to the assurances, it's because something has happened somewhere along the way to cause it to appear on the assurances form, okay? And I even put a little screenshot there at the bottom. I'm not going to read about all the, you know, this is required, but it is required. It's a federal requirement. We've got all that stuff in here. Please make sure you read it before you sign it, because we're going to hold you to it. And I don't know if it's got your signature on it, doesn't fly. Review your SAM, your System for Award Management. Make sure it's in date. It's especially important for non-LEAs, non-school systems, because when you go to get your money, if it's out of date, you're not getting it. So make sure it's not expired. Okay, make sure you upload not just an email that said you submitted the paperwork to get it reviewed and approved. Make sure you submit something that has the expiration date on it, because that's what we're going to be looking for. And your unique entity ID, and that you are active. Your building maintenance and fire inspection. Again, is extremely important. Yes, every county does things a little differently. So if you have questions, work with your program administrator. It needs to be up to date and valid for the whole duration of your academic school year. If you have documentation that the building you're using is only inspected every 2 to 3 years, then upload that information. And it is your responsibility to ensure inspection reports remain up to date throughout the year. Now, if we'll tell you, if it looks like it expires sometime in the middle of the year, typically your program administrator will say to you, hey, make sure you upload the new inspection when it comes in. Sometimes we don't immediately check it, but we are going to check it at some point during the year. And when we monitor, it will be reviewed. So please make sure that your stuff stays up to date. Stay on top of that. Occupancy. If your programming is occurring at a PSU, a DPI facility needs survey is acceptable. It doesn't really give us a lot of information, but occupancy for school buildings is typically not an issue. So if you're not in a school building, then that occupancy permit becomes very important, because you have to have the occupancy to hold your students as well as your staff safely in the space. Okay. That includes every adult and every child. Every person that's in that building counts in your occupancy. So please make sure that you have an occupancy limit that is conducive to your programming. Because if it's not, then we'll have to look at possibly reducing your funding. And remember, 50 is the minimum of students. Okay, transit inspections. You need them to be actually dated September 2024 or later. Okay, the later the better. If they've been done during the summer or late spring, that's great, because that'll carry you through most of the year. If you've got your leased vehicles, then ask them for it. If you have your own vehicles for your program, or you own them, then make sure that you upload those new inspections when they're done. If you don't offer transportation, just upload a statement saying, you don't You don't transport students because it's a required document. You have to have a placeholder, like Susan was talking about for the evaluation. Feeder school collaboration form. Please, 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 please read the directions. A, B, C, and E to be completed by the school that you're collaborating with. If the 21st Century subgrantee is the LEA charter or lab school, then the program should select box A3. Complete one form for each feeder school that you're collaborating with. If you can't get one from the feeder school, then you need to talk with your program administrator, because then other arrangements need to happen to make sure you can meet your attendance goals. That's why when people write for 21st Century Grant, it's not necessarily a good thing to list every school in the district as a feeder school. Just food for thought. Okay, also section D, only if the LEA charter lab school chose not to collaborate or did not respond. Okay, if it has declined to collaborate, then you have to remove your school from your list and submit a program amendment to serve a new school or increase the enrollment at another school that is willing to collaborate. And then section E, all organizations must provide wet signature. Okay, so not just a typed in signature. Like an official thing, even if it's like DocuSign. But it has to be an official signature that's recognized. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the fiscal team to talk about their fiscal related documents.
Okay, we're back. So a lot of this is just a refresher from year one, but we're going to kind of go through those related documents for the upcoming fiscal year 26. So here is going to be a list of the required documents for fiscal that will be required to be uploaded in CCIP. And we do go through and we review each of these documents. The list is here. The budget 208, of course, is the big one. You need your fiscal procedures that we don't actually review those when you upload them, but if you're going to be monitored in year two, whether it's a desk review or a actual site visit, we will review those fiscal procedures then. Of course, we want updated organization charts, the conflict of interest agreement, any contracts that you may have at the beginning. Typically, all contracts aren't worked out, this early in the year for the upcoming year. So that's not a requirement that you have to have them all uploaded, but if you have any that are ready to go, you want to upload those so we can review them and make sure everything is intact so that we can approve it so that you guys can go ahead and start to incur, the services for that. But as you get your contracts uploaded throughout the year, you can always put those in CCIP and we will review them and approve them. But just make sure that you get approval in CCIP prior to starting to request reimbursement for services. There's a fiscal questionnaire as well as the financial reporting instructions. And of course, we're requiring that you guys are year two, a 21st century inventory listing, because if you purchased equipment in your first year, you should have an inventory listing of what you purchased so that you can follow it throughout this grant cycle. So here's a picture of the fiscal questionnaire where it's going to ask you more so about your with your organization as far as what other types of funding you're receiving, whether they are local, state, or federal, other discretionary funds you may receive. It speaks to you ensuring that you have some working capital for at least 3 months, because as you all know, for those who have been around a while, those monies may not drop right away, and programming has to start by October, and you have to prepare before October. So you're going to need some working capital until those monies are dropped and pushed out to you guys. We do ask about those nonprofits and we have a board and who's serving on the board, things of that nature. And we do require signatures on these documents before you upload them. Financial status reporting, we want you to upload one of the three, whichever applies to you. If it's a single book audit, if your organization is subject to a single book audit, if not applicable, then you would upload that Form 990, return of organization for exempt from income tax, the most recent year. Or you would upload your organization's end of fiscal year income statement. So we're gonna wanna see one of those three. And, these are all required documents. So if it's not uploaded, we're not moving this application forward, okay? Of course, conflict of interest agreement, and we have you guys go through and read that to make sure you understand and actually document any areas that could potentially be a conflict of interest agreement. An example is that if you have someone who's a site coordinator and they may have a tutor working within the program, then there's a relationship, a familiar relationship, family member, then we give you an area on page 2 of the conflict of interest agreement where you can actually detail out how you are going to address that conflict of interest agreement. And also, along with this agreement being required to upload into CCIP, you would also want to have that addressed in your policies and written policies and procedures, how you would address a conflict of interest if there is one that comes up in your organization. And, of course, it could be different scenarios with a conflict of interest, whether it's an employee or a contractor or a vendor you're working with. But just make sure you need to be able to address that in this document here that you upload, as well as detailing in your policies and procedures how you would handle a conflict of interest. And if you have questions about it, that's why we're here, to talk with you and talk through it, okay? And like I said, a lot of this stuff nothing's really changed. It's just that we just like to go over it and you have access to it. And this next slide basically goes into examples of a conflict of interest. So talks about no employee, officer, or agent may participate in the selection of an award or a contract supported by a federal award if there's a real or apparent conflict of interest. So if you are the program director and someone that is vying for services that may be a family member, that's a conflict of interest, and you would want to detail how you're going to recuse yourself from that or just not deal with that vendor at all. So these are just some different areas that you want to look at that would constitute a conflict of interest, like contracting with immediate family members, hiring an unqualified relative or friend to provide services, may not making a business decision involving a company in which the board director or the program employee has a financial interest. So we've had issues come up in the past where we saw that there were conflicts of interest, related to some of those areas. But this was just like some examples that you could look at when you are completing that conflict of interest statement and signing off on that you're attesting to it. Again, the written policies and procedures, I think for fiscal, this is the most important part for us outside of approving your 208 budget, because the written policies and procedures really drives your entire organization when it comes to the fiscal side. So if you don't have policies and procedures in place to be able to designate and detail day-to-day activities, then oftentimes there are other things that fall short. And that's one of the things that we see when we are monitoring, whether it's a desk review, technical assistance, or a site visit, is that their policies and procedures are not in place to address your day-to-day activity. So it's basically your policies and procedures, you're making sure that you're following the uniform guidance, and we list it out here, but you also need to talk in your written policies and procedures how you are implementing. What are you doing day to day with those policies and procedures? How are you making them work based on that uniform guidance? And yes, we did come up with another link that we will have available for you that you can look at that really goes into deeper detail about each of the required written policies and procedures here. This year, there were 2 additional procedures added. If you look at the bottom, the mandatory disclosures, which is 200.13, and the whistleblower protections, 200.217, are new required policies and procedures you must have. So if you've already got policies and procedures, you need to go in and update and add those to that. And again, like I said, there is a link that Monica created a document with, and there's a link in the presentation here that you'll have access to that really goes in and delves into the actual details of each of these written policies and procedures you're required to have. And if, again, you guys are going into year 2, so some of you are going to have site visits coming up, and those are the things that we'll be looking at, okay? This is the link for the fiscal written policies resource right here. So you'll get this, and you'll be able to go to that link, and it'll really just kind of detail out each of the required policies and procedures on the previous slide. It helps you, gives you an idea of how you need to address those within your organization. Okay, next thing we'll need, of course, is the organizational chart. And oftentimes, initially in the beginning of the year, you may not have all of the staff members that that you anticipate hiring for the year, but we want you to update this and provide us with as much information as possible, because we actually do use this to compare it based on the budget and your positions and the number of staff you're hiring. So we always want to see the name and the position title, and it should match back to what's found in your budget narrative. So if I see a site coordinator on the org chart, I should see someone budgeted in that site coordinator's position in the 208, the 53, 50, 110, 113. Again, anyone with 21st century responsibilities should be listed, and that's admin and support staff, program staff, even volunteers, any W-2 employees, as well as your 1099 contracted staff that you would be paying. So we want to be able to see that org chart, that it actually reflects and refers back to the 208 when we're looking at contractors and position summary tab within that 208 budget. Contracts, reminder, the subgrantee sets the scope, outlining the deliverables they need from the contract. And I spoke about this a little earlier. So if you are seeking someone for services for enrichment activities, let's say for music education, and you want to be able, as the subgrantee, you are setting the scope for what you want these services to be provided to your organization. So you're setting the scope, outlining what you're looking for as far as deliverables that you need from the contractor, and that's what you put out there. The contractor would provide you with their proposal based on your scope. So you should be developing a scope and deliverables when you are actually looking to solicit for quotes for services in your community or in your area. And your contract requirements, you'll see always the name of the vendor, and you want to talk about the purchase of service, the time period. And the time period of the contract could be the grant award year, but what about the frequency and duration? You may want something for just 6 weeks, or you may want something throughout the year. So you want to have like a time period of the contract and the frequency of the activities. The contract amount, as well as sufficient cost details to facilitate the invoice review. Again, specify the deliverables that must be rendered and accepted prior to payments being made. So you want to be able to negotiate that contract to get the things that you were looking for to provide for your organization. Deliverables must be quantifiable and measurable. You should also have something for non-performance in the contract. If they don't live up to their end of the contract, you should have some statement or a paragraph in there that's saying that if they are not performing up to what you were expecting, and there's an exit clause that you can, get out of the contract. And there's always printed names, signatures, and dates of both parties. So these are the things that we want to see in these contracts that come in. We want to be able to document if we're doing a review of a fiscal review. If there are contracts, we want to see the quotes that you had out there, if there are reasonable number of quotes for any contracts over $10,000. We want to see that. We want to see how do you go about the process of procurement, following the procurement processes if you have to. And contracted service reminders, of course, you're going to upload the contract to CCIP. One of the fiscal monitors or your fiscal monitor will approve the comment, and we'll put an approval comment in CCIP. And at that point, once you see that approval comment in CCIP, you can request for reimbursement. We talked about this earlier, that subgrantees may not contract with any party which is debarred, suspended, or excluded based on the uniform guidance here. And there, we talked about the websites, Verify on the Department of Administration for the state of North Carolina has a website where you can check for suspended or debarred vendors, as well as sam.gov, which is the federal website. And all personnel, of course, including contracted staff who interact with children, must have a criminal background check prior to providing services. And subgrantees seeking reimbursement prior to the contract approval will result in question costs, and repayment must be made to DPI. And we had several programs this year, we had to pull funds back because they did not follow through with getting that contract approved through DPI prior to requesting reimbursement for services. So we want to stay away from that as much as we can. And the next slide here is the inventory list, sample inventory listing spreadsheet that is in CCIP. And this, guys, you are in your second year, so most of you may have purchased some equipment during the year, so you want to go ahead and add to make sure you have your inventory listing of what you purchased, and it just basically details everything: the date, the date, the name of the purchase item, the cost, things of that nature, as well as some type of ID number that you can identify that equipment with. And this will be in the required document section this year, because like I said, year two, more than likely in your first year, you may have made some purchases of equipment. And also, this is an Excel document. So if you do happen to have any capitalized inventory, which I don't know if any of our programs do, but if you do, then there is a tab that you can use for recording a capitalized inventory purchases over $5,000. It is on this spreadsheet as well. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Monica so she can go over the actual budget 208, which is the most important part of the fiscal continuation application.
Hello again. All right, so budget 208, there's 4 required tabs. The FY budget 208 tab, and of course the 3 supplementary tabs: positions, contracted services, and equipment and furniture. You will see the 209 tabs off on the other side of equipment and furniture, but for the initial application, just these are the 4 required tabs. All right, the header. So the header does look a little bit different. Of course, you'll put your organization name and unit number and your cohort number. And so the period that we're budgeting for is 7/1/2025 to 9/30/2026. So I think I mentioned this in TA sessions, and Erica is actually getting ready to shut down. Last submission is Monday. Recommendation is submit as much as you can, that has cleared your bank on Monday. Reason being, you don't want to carry, if you don't submit for it, that means you're going to have to budget for it all out again here, because the carryover amount is as of 7/1. So if you don't submit by Monday, that it doesn't open up until after July 1st. So if you draw the money down, you can kind of clear those funds out for this fiscal year, and then start with, if you'll have carryover, but it won't be quite as much as if you didn't draw down by this Monday. So that's my recommendation. But you'll list the carryover as of 7/1/2025. And then this year we've separated it out, like your academic year, your standard summer, and your summer intensive. So if you've been awarded each one of those, you would put them in there. If you've only been do academic year, you'll just put an amount there, leave the other 2 at zeros. So when you budget it out, similar to last year, but you will have a little bit more flexibility because of carryover, your current year amounts, you have to have that amount, at least that amount in that column. So say you'd have $50,000 for academic year. When you get to budgeting it out, you have to have at least $50,000 in that column. Same thing for standard summer, Same thing for summer intensive. The carryover amount that you can move that around between the three types of programming. Does that make sense? I'm getting some blank stares. All right. Let's see. So this screen shows where we have a column that's direct versus the indirect. So as you are budgeting, you will know, is this category chart of account code, would that go towards my indirect services total? And some chart of account codes do have they'll have a direct portion or an indirect portion. And let's see if I have an example here. I don't think it shows on this one, but think about, like, I know office or supplies, not necessarily office supplies, but supplies. So that would be a chart of account code that has both a direct as well as an indirect. So if you think about administrative supplies, which could be your office supplies, janitorial supplies, those would go into indirect, whereas any supplies that your students are using, that would go in the indirect. Or I think I said that wrong, direct. We still have the detailed budget narrative. So if the narrative goes on one of the three supplementary tabs, it will say what tab to put it on. So if it's a position, make sure you put it on the positions tab, the narrative. If it needs to be on this FY budget tab, it'll show right here, detailed narrative required here, and then you'll write your narrative in this space. The final column here, that is a sum, you don't have to add it up, but as long as you put in academic year, standard summer, and summer intensive, it will add up in the last column, the final column. All right, this is a screenshot of down at the bottom. So there's a built-in check to determine, do I meet the indirect services maximum of 20%, or do I have to make adjustments? So if you have to make adjustments, so the budget is designed to calculate that percentage for you. And if you are in compliance, that cell will be green. If it requires adjustments because you're over 20%, that will be that light red color. And you need to go back to your budget and shift some things around so that you move more into the direct services. And there's just a reminder, indirect student services, actions and activities that the organization or program staff undertake to benefit students, but without direct one-on-one interaction with those students. And this is what I was talking about, where it will be green if you meet that indirect service maximum. So it'll give you the percentage and then either be the green or the light red. Again, detailed budget narrative. Sometimes it's on the FY budget tab. Sometimes it requires you to go to the positions tab. So just follow what it says in those on the FY budget tab to make sure that you put the narrative in the correct cell. Positions tab is the same as the previous year. There's like two parts. Part one is tell us about the position duties. And then the second part is tell us the number of positions, the rate per hour. These boxes are text boxes, so you can put a range. Like if you have different rates per hour, number of hours per week and total weeks. One thing here, because you may be, some of your money may be for previous, like up until June 30th, but you're carrying it over. So you might have some like July 1st, but in your carryover, you might have some expenses that actually relate to before July 1st. So in order for it to make sense to us, kind of tell us what's the breakdown between that? Because sometimes if you have too much in there and you don't let us know that this is for, actually includes something from before July 1st, it might not look reasonable to us because it's going to be a higher amount. So let us know, that, okay, I actually have, $6,000 that I haven't submitted for reimbursement that covers this time frame. And then starting 7/1 to 6 or 9/30/2026, this is what the amount is. Contracted services tab. Actually, let me back up here. So the positions tab, this was similar to last year. It will bring over the account title and the account budget code. So you'll know, okay, do I have to put something for 113? Some rows will have nothing budgeted. That just means that type of position, you didn't put anything in there. Just leave those alone. Don't delete them or anything, because it's possible you could add funds to that chart of account code. And if you delete it here, it's going to be gone and you won't have a space to put that narrative if you do a 209. Contracted services tab, the account code, the account title does not come over from the FY budget tab. What does come over as a check, to tie back, it will give you a total of what things you need to detail out. So you want to make sure whatever you put down up in that top section, that it does equal and tie out to the total at the bottom. And then this final column, it says contract uploaded into CCIP for review and approval. This is a yes or no drop down. Sounds very simple, but it's really helpful for the fiscal monitors if you let us know it's in there versus not in there. Because we do look at a lot of contracts and a lot of other required documents. And again, if something's not approved, okay, if we don't document it in CCIP that it's approved, then it's an unapproved contract that could result in question costs. So by telling us, yes, it's there, that's helps us be like, I need to go look for it and find it in the contracted services slot. But if it's not there, then I know that it's still in progress. And all your contracts do not have to be finalized to submit your application. Okay, so if you're still finalizing contracts, I would not hold off. I would go ahead and submit to Chief Admin approve if that's the only thing that you're waiting for. Okay, we want to get you on our allotment log as soon as possible, and we can always come back. You can upload contracts and we can review them later. So just keep that in mind. This is just a FYI tab. We always put it in there. Just make sure you're categorizing your staff correctly, W-2 versus a 1099 contractor. Ultimately, though, that is your responsibility to make sure that you are classifying your staff correctly. And the last supplementary tab, equipment and furniture tab. Again, the chart, the account budget code and the account title, those do not come over. However, we do have the total check at the bottom. This is going to be for 461 and 462. So make sure just detail out what type of computer equipment, furniture, other equipment are you purchasing, and make sure the total ties out there. Signatures and upload, we do require wet signatures. Slots are available to upload 2 documents. We do require the Excel file, and that's why we do allow for 2 slots. You can upload the Excel file as well as just the signature page with a PDF signature page with your wet signatures. So, but because a lot of times the cells, like if you upload the 208 as a PDF, it's very difficult for us to read what's in that cell. So uploading the Excel required. And of course, make sure you have the fiscal agent and the program director signatures. Those are required if you did list a chief finance officer. There's a slot space for that in the signature section. All right. Any questions about the budget? So closing and next steps, the application will open on Monday, June 16th. So that's just this coming Monday. The application is due Friday, July 18th. So you got about a month to get everything in order and together. Don't wait to the last minute. We do process applications first come, first serve. So, and I'll tell you, if you submit before July 18th, you'll, based on history, you'll be the first. So, but if you get it in, if you're ready to submit it, go ahead and get it in. Katrina and I are the
Till the 18th, because if all of them flood in on the 18th, it's gonna take a lot longer for all of them to get processed. So as soon as you're done, get it in.
And we're down to 2 fiscal monitors for the summer. So that's an even better reason to get it in, so that we can.
Take vacation.
Try to.
We have to have our nails on, so yeah.
All right, 4th Annual Program Foundations Conference. For you guys, that starts, the actual conference starts Wednesday, July 30th, 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. However, starting Tuesday evening, July 29th, there will be a program spotlight social that you are invited to that starts at 6 p.m.
And it's being catered by Age of Learning, so they are really doing a nice event for our subgrantees. So there's more information that's coming out about that on the listserv for you to sign up for that. And right now, I think they've agreed to host up to 300 people. So we're going to allow every program to bring three people. So start thinking about that. You'll see a sign up that's going to come out on the listserv. And then after everybody's had a chance to register for those slots, if there are any left available, we'll let people know that and you can sign up for additional folks. Okay.
All right, I think that's it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, about 5 minutes, and then Book Harvest is going to provide their training. So probably about more like about a 10-minute break to give them time to get set up. So if you guys want to go to the restroom, they're out the door and around here to the left. Or if you want any more coffee, water, snacks, go ahead and do that. We'll get started back in about 10 minutes.
Oops. Ooh.